Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've sent us your sources, and we've gone deep to pull out the most crucial, fascinating info just for you. It's your shortcut to getting up to speed.
And today, we're looking at a really unsettling case you asked about. Ed Gein.
Yeah, Ed Gein. The material you sent dives into his story, the guy often called the real Leatherface.
Right, and it starts kind of unexpectedly. A disappearance in this quiet little town, Plainfield, Wisconsin, back in '57. Things just unraveled from there into, well, unimaginable horror. And it's chilling how this real story became the blueprint for some huge horror icons.
Exactly. You picture Plainfield, right? Seems totally normal, hardworking town. But then November 1957, deer season. And Bernice Warden, who ran the hardware store, she vanishes. 58 years old.
And that's when things start feeling off. Her son finds blood in the store.
Yeah, finds blood. And he mentions Ed Gein had been in the store recently. A local guy.
And Gein, he was known around town, but more as the local oddball. Maybe a bit strange, but not
dangerous, right. People didn't see him that way.
No. Which just shows you appearances can be so deceiving, and how quickly that feeling of safety in a community can just shatter.
So Sheriff Arch Sly heads out to Gein's place. An isolated farmhouse, kind of spooky, on the edge of town. That's how the sources describe it.
And what he finds there, it's just horrific. In the woodshed,
Bernice Warden's body, hanging upside down.
decapitated, gutted like a deer.
Yeah. And Gein himself, when they arrested him, reportedly just calm, almost detached about it all.
It's chilling. And then inside the house, it was apparently even worse. Just decades of filth, squalor.
And amongst all that, the discoveries, things that are hard to even comprehend.
Bowls made from human skulls, actual skull.
String of nipples, lampshades made of human skin.
Chairs upholstered with it, masks made from real human faces, flayed and preserved. It's just, the scale of it is staggering.
And it didn't stop there. They found Mary Hogan's face in a paper bag.
Right, Mary Hogan, the local tavern owner who'd vanished 3 years earlier. Suddenly that cold case made horrifying sense.
Gein initially didn't talk, apparently, but when they confronted him with Bernice Warden's body,
He confessed to killing Warden and Hogan. But, and this is another layer of just macabre detail,
he claimed all the other stuff, the masks, the bowls.
he said he made them from bodies he'd dug up, stolen from local cemeteries, not people he'd killed, apart from those two.
Which is horrifying in a whole different way. Violating graves.
Absolutely. It suggests, this wasn't impulsive. It was planned, prolonged. He was doing this for years, apparently.
While living amongst them, being their neighbor.
Exactly. And you can only imagine the shock in Plainfield. It wasn't just the brutality, it was knowing who did it. Someone they saw, maybe interacted with.
Yeah, the guy who fixed things did odd jobs.
And
Unbelievable.
of course, a story like this, it couldn't stay local.
No way. The media descended. And suddenly Ed Gein, this obscure figure, he starts becoming this dark cultural phenomenon.
Right. And author Robert Bloch, who was actually living in Wisconsin then, he was immediately drawn to the case.
That's the Psycho connection, isn't it?
That's the direct line. Gein's story, especially the relationship with his mother, heavily influenced Bloch's novel Psycho.
Which, kind of shifted horror towards the psychological. Less monster, more disturbed human.
Precisely. And speaking of the mother, the police found her room in Gein's farmhouse, perfectly preserved, like a shrine.
The sources really dig into his background. Alcoholic father, right? And this really domineering mother, Augusta.
Yeah, religiously fanatical is how she's often described. Very isolated family life. And Augusta had these extremely negative views about women.
Called them inherently evil, things like that, quoted in the sources. It paints a grim picture of his upbringing.
It really does. You think about that kind of isolation, that intense control from Augusta.
Yeah.
It's like a perfect storm for serious psychological problems.
And didn't his brother die under strange circumstances too? Henry?
Yes, there was a brush fire. The circumstances around Henry's death were, let's just say, unusual, adding another layer of darkness to the family history.
So after Augusta died, the sources suggest Ed just went further downhill. His grip on reality loosened even more.
Seems like it. He was deeply afraid of women, probably because of his mother's teachings, but also incredibly lonely.
Which led him to the cemetery.
Apparently, those nighttime raids, digging up bodies, and then crafting those horrific items. The mammary vest they found, leggings made of skin.
Yeah, the reports that he would actually wear this.
Yeah, it points to a really, really profound psychosis.
Yeah.
Just a completely detached from normal reality.
And the theory about Mary Hogan, the tavern owner he killed, That she maybe reminded him of his mother somehow.
That's one theory explored in the sources, yeah. Hogan was apparently quite large, outspoken, perhaps a distorted echo of Augusta in his mind.
And when she disappeared, they found blood and money at her tavern, but nobody suspected Gein back then.
No. He managed to keep that side of himself completely hidden. It's chilling how well he maintained that facade.
So the aftermath in Plainfield must have been just chaos.
Oh, absolutely. Intense media scrutiny, the townspeople deeply disturbed, uncomfortable.
And that's when the Gein humor started. That dark humor the sources mention.
Yeah, things like jokes about ladyfingers or farmers' fannies. It sounds awful, but it's also maybe a defense mechanism, a way for the community to try and process something so completely horrifying.
A grim coping mechanism, maybe. Then came the sanity hearing.
Right. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, severe mental illness, hallucinations, delusions.
And the doctors pointed back to his mother, right? That relationship being the root of it all.
That was their conclusion, yes.
Yes.
Deeply rooted in that relationship. There's this one anecdote where Gein grabbed a reporter's hand, really nervously.
Asking, what are they going to do to me?
Yeah. Even amidst all the horror, you get these glimpses of his disturbed state, maybe fear.
But legally, he was found insane, committed to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane.
And life in Plainfield changed. The sources mentioned people started locking their doors for the first time.
Wow. The end of an era of innocence, you could say.
Pretty much. That sense of trust was just gone. And then the farmhouse burned down.
Mysteriously, right, before it could be auctioned off.
Yeah, never officially solved, but the townspeople were apparently quite relieved, like closing a chapter, even if strangely.
Though they still auctioned his other stuff. And his car became this macabre tourist attraction for a while.
Yes, the fascination didn't just disappear, it lingered in these strange ways.
And Gein himself, in the hospital, the sources say he was mostly quiet, but had odd moments.
Yeah, generally quiet, but reports of strange behavior, especially around the full moon. Then, years later, in 1968...
They decided he was competent to stand trial.
Correct. He stood trial, was found guilty of murder, but because of the earlier insanity ruling, he was sent back to Central State.
And he just lived out his days there.
Yep, died there. And his story, while maybe fading from the front pages, it really lodged itself in the American psyche, became almost mythic.
And that brings us back to the horror movie connection. Leatherface.
Directly inspired. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the skin mask, the bone furniture, the whole vibe. It's pure Gein, filtered through a nightmarish lens.
Gunnar Hansen, the actor who played Leatherface, even said something about it being like a child's nightmare version of Gein.
Exactly what the sources quote him saying. It taps into that primal fear that Gein's real actions embodied.
And Buffalo Bill, too, from The Silence of the Lambs.
Making the skin suit. Another direct borrowing from the horrific reality of the Gein case.
It's like these fictional monsters are terrifying, but the fact that Gein actually did this stuff is maybe even more disturbing.
Arguably, yes, because it's real. There was even that movie specifically about Gein back in 2001 showing the enduring interest.
So Gein died in 1984, burning next to his mother, Augusta.
Yes, and even his gravesite has this dark history. His tombstone was stolen, later recovered.
And people still leave flowers?
Letters.
Apparently so. It
Yeah.
shows this persistent, unsettling fascination. The sources kind of end on that note, how we can never truly know what went on in his mind. And how the community, despite knowing about his mental illness, just couldn't find sympathy because the acts were so monstrous. The facade he kept up.
Exactly. The sheer horror overshadowed everything else.
So it's quite a stark reminder, isn't it, that the roots of some of our biggest fictional scares are grounded in something very real, very dark.
This deep dive really shows that. It's complex isolation, psychological damage, a small town's innocence completely shattered.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about.
Right. Why are we so fascinated by figures like Ed Gein, this enduring morbid curiosity? What does it say about us? About the potential for both good and, well, unimaginable evil?
Definitely something to mull over. It touches on some deep, perhaps uncomfortable parts of the human psyche.
It does indeed.
Well, thank you for sending in these sources. They were definitely unsettling, but important to explore. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And if you have other source material you want us to tackle, send it our way.